Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Father Francis Agustilo mentioned at the start of the conference regarding the speakers, mostly from the Salesians of Don Bosco. I think five of the keynote speakers, except Dr. Jail Cornelio, are from the Salesians of Don Bosco. After the first session, the first day, we mentioned to him that I also came from Don Bosco High School. So lahat ng speakers from Don Bosco. So Father Roel is also a product of Don Bosco. So we are here in gratitude to Don Bosco who pioneered in systematic youth ministry. I developed a cough a week ago, but don't worry. I always test every day and it's negative as of this morning. So if I kind of sneeze, don't worry. I have also my Kleenex here. I also have my alcohol here. I'm properly protected. So I don't be a spreader here in this conference. So the topic assigned to me is mentoring the young to discern their life choice, vocation, discernment. I propose two parts in this presentation. The first part, mentoring the young, and the second part, to discern their life choice. Mentoring the young involves the following aspects: context, contact, and content. Context of the young, we need data to understand the young, and we have so much data already gathered from day one. So much data to reflect after this youth conference, different surveys, and the socio-cultural context of the young with the growing globalization. Christus Vidit, number 68, automatic. I'm happy, it means you're not sleeping. In the context of growing globalization, the Synod Fathers wanted the many differences of contexts and cultures, even within individual countries, to be duly emphasized. The roles of today's youth are so many that in some countries one tends to quotes when I'm asked to give a talk. Being a Christian is not a result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea, but the encounter with an event, a person which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. Personal contact, encountering Jesus ever young. I gave a retreat in 1995, 2 years after I was ordained. I was ordained in 1993. I gave a retreat to seminarians, candidates for ordination, 5-day retreat. I'll not mention that seminary or the diocese. And then there were 16 seminarians, and one of them, I kind of caught my attention because I told him, from your sharing, I never sensed any personal encounter with Jesus in your prayer. You just went through the seminary, just going through the motions of the liturgy of the hours, the prayers, the masses. But I missed something in terms of your sharing about any personal insight of Jesus as a person. Please ask your bishop to postpone your ordination. And then he said, Father, I already sent out the invitations for my ordination. And besides, my family are already preparing for my ordination. So I told him, well, it's up to you. But if you ask me as retreat director, now it's the role of the mentor, this will be problematic as a priest because you have went through the seminary without even a personal, deep experience of Jesus as a person. He went through with the ordination. After 6 months, he asked to be dispensed from the sacred orders. I hope this will not happen to some of us. In this audience, I am not talking to young who are still searching, but many of you have already decided to enter religious life in the seminary or involved in formation. This is very important, and this has been emphasized by previous speakers. Encountering the mentor. And this one, I thank Christus Vivid because this section of the exhortation or letter of Pope Francis lists down the qualities of the mentor. With this, I didn't have to prepare anything about this particular part of my presentation. And the young people in this synod were very clear about the idea of a mentor. Being a faithful Christian, that's number one, who engages with the church and the world, someone who constantly seeks holiness, someone who is confident without judging, confident. Similarly, someone who actively listens to the needs of young people and responds in kind, someone deeply loving and self aware, someone who recognizes his or her limits and knows the joys and sorrows of the spiritual journey. If you have time, please watch the YouTube interview of Pope Francis with 10 young people. It was released 2 weeks ago. It's a very, very inspiring interview, disturbing questions from an agnostic, someone who was abused, someone who was into pornography, someone who's into all kinds of different experiences. They were very direct in their questions, and the Pope was also very direct in his responses. No edits in this interview, very real dialogue with these 10 young people uh, you, in Spanish, but of course it's translated to English. It's now making the rounds. It's now kind of viral in many church communities. It's a very, in a way, disturbing, uh, uh, especially when we listen to the pressures of the young. But the Pope was there as a mentor, not a judge. He was listening, and you can see him struggling in answering the questions of these 10 young people. Very interesting. Please find time. It's more powerful than my presentation this morning, listening to that interview, watching that interview. Acknowledgement of their own humanity. So basically, going back, being a faithful Christian in my course in Vocation Discernment, this is summarized in one word: someone who is in touch with God. Being in touch with God. That's the first element of a mentor. Being in touch with God. A person of prayer, a person of docility to the Holy Spirit. And the second quality is about being in touch with oneself, being in touch with humanity. I've read a lot of articles on discernment. I have all the lists of the different kinds of bibliography on discernment, but discernment can only be reduced to two: being in touch with God and being in touch with the self, with the human condition. Just take note of these two. As a mentor and as we guide people, we also watch for these 2 points. Mentors should not lead young people as passive followers, but walk alongside them, allowing them to be active participants in the journey. And then uh, the ability of the person to participate in the life of the church. I will on that later. All such mentors should benefit from being well formed and engaged in ongoing formation. So we have different uh, kind of centers here, like Emmaus, maybe the Salesians, the Center for Ignatian Spirituality. All these programs are meant for ongoing formation. So basically, these are the qualities of a mentor, encountering the mentor. And the third dimension in terms of encountering is with others, with family, with the community, and the educational institutions. I have to mention educational institutions because I'm kind of involved here in terms of promoting how our educational institutions can be centers for evangelization. So that's about contact as encounter. Next is contact as engagement. Here I will be very short. In Christus Vivit, the engagement is described in terms of outreach and the other in terms of growth. Ad extra and ad intra activities. Engagement is also an experience of discipleship. Again, I will discuss this later. And then the last form of contact is entrustment. Vocation defined as God's call and human response in discipleship is experienced as entrustment, Mary's fiat and surrender, committing with trust and confidence to God's plan for each person. Contact, mentoring with the young is to help them commit with trust and confidence to God's plan in their lives. This is the area of rogate, the prayer for vocations. Whenever we pray for vocations, that is entrustment. Because in prayer, there is a section where we can organize prayer, where we can control the conditions of prayer. But there is also the other dimension of God. We cannot control God. In the mentoring process, there is also the area of surrender, of entrustment. So, entrustment to God, the discernment is the basis of all else, and then entrustment to being with others, the call to missionary service. And then the third section of mentoring is content. So I began with context, the need for data gathering. Next is contact in terms of encountering the young, engaging with the young, and entrustment in terms of prayer. Now, the third aspect of mentoring is content for and by the young. For the content, it's the life story, the narrative of the young, the human vocation story, the Christian vocation story, and the specific Christian vocation story as lay ordained or religious. It's the call to the specific contribution to the kingdom. It is the story. A week ago, before this conference, I was in Baguio, and I got a call from my former student in high school. I was their moderator in 1987 when they were in third year, and they arrived in Baguio, four of them with their wives. And they called me and said, Father, can we come and visit you in Mirador? And we asked a request. What request? To bless our marriages. We are celebrating this year our silver jubilee, 25 years of marriage. So they came, I prayed with them, I had lunch with them, and that was wonderful to listen to their stories from third year high school, now getting married for 25 years, sharing about their children, about their commitment, and so on. That is content. I thought my work as moderator in 1987 was finished after I saw them in high school. It continues until now. In May, one of my students is asking me to again celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary. I was hoping one of them could become a Jesuit. Well, one did, but decided to transfer to another uh, uh, kind of congregation. There was one. I was hoping he would become a Jesuit. I was spending much time with him, guiding him, but it did not work. Mysterious ways. What I'm saying, content is the life story. And this is important because in the content, when we listen to the story of the young, we also listen to the story of Jesus, the story of God in their lives. And this story is the story of salvation. The salvation that God offers us is an invitation to be part of a love story interwoven with our personal stories. It is alive and wants to be born in our midst so that we can bear fruit just as we are, wherever we are, and with everyone all around us. The Lord comes there to sow and to be sown. Power of the story. That is content. As a mentor, we need to be experts in understanding the power of the narrative, the power of the story. When I was vocation director of the Jesuits from 1989 to 1999. I was made vocation director when I was in first year theology student, national vocation director because no priest was available to become vocation director. So the provincial was kind of, uh, risking. Maybe we can ask Quilongquilong. Anyway, he did regency in Cagayan de Oro. I was assistant director to the pre-novitiate there. maybe he can be vocation director. So I was vocation director for 10 years, probably the longest in the Jesuit province. In fact, they called me vocation dictator because for 10 years. And of course, as vocation director, I had to form a team. And one of the members of the team was Father Rohel Abais. And of course, a number of Jesuits were in my team. And as vocation director, I received a letter from a young man from Baguio. I read the letter and I was so impressed with the letter. This is one way of mentoring. So I told Rohel, go to Baguio and search for this person. This is the name. This is the school. And of course, si Rohel was very obedient. So he went to Baguio and I told Rohel, you cannot come back until you meet this person and give me a report of this person. So Father Rohel went, searched for this guy in the dormitories, in the school. I think for a day he could not search for him. But because of my threat that he could not come back until he meets this guy, he continued searching for him until he found him. So he found this guy, and then he came back. And Rohel told me about the encounter. He told me about the contact, about this person. Because we don't have a school in Baguio. We don't have a university there. And this person eventually entered the Jesuits. And in his Thanksgiving message, he said, I entered the Jesuits because someone searched for me. It was the first time that someone searched for me. He's now one of our young priests, Father John Marie Manzano. In mentoring, take note, as formators, we read all the email messages, letters. We only try to find this cue. Is this letter that is the message of the letter conveys an experience of God? Kung may experience of God, ayan, that's already a prospect. Is this person reflective in terms of what is going through? That's already a prospect. That's content. This person is serious about his vocation story, human story, Christian story, and the search for a particular contribution to the kingdom. Part 2. I hope I still have time. I've written my dissertation on vocation. Well, I had to focus on vocation, no choice. Because first year theology, full-time student, that time we had to prepare for 54 theses for comprehensive exams. So I had to choose my research topic on vocations to kind of hit many birds in one stone. I was studying, so I chose vocation as my topic for research. So I did my MA, writing on vocations, which became the basic plan for the directors of vocations in the Philippines. I was ordained in 93. I was happy in my ministry for 6 years, giving retreats to young people, young priests, very happy. And then the provincial then said, Joe, we are sending you to Rome. 35 years old na ako. Why? We want you to study spirituality because no one has finished spirituality from Rome. And then Father Arevalo said, maybe you can survive in Rome because you have the temperament. I don't know what he meant by temperament. So Father Ruben Canseco said, Joe, I heard you're going to Rome. Please don't be Romanized. I came back 2011. And I told Father Ruben, you told me don't be Romanized, which I did. But I did something to my Jesuit companions in the Curia in Bellarmino. They are now Filipinized because of the adobo, the pancit, and all kinds that we were doing there in Rome, just to manage the struggles of learning a new language, a culture, and so on. So I did my licentiate paper on vocations, my doctoral dissertation on vocation, the grace of vocation. So I've read so many books on vocation. So I'd like to support Father Martin that youth ministry is a science, vocation is also a science. There's so much writings now on the theology of vocation, revisiting the idea of vocation. In fact, the idea of vocation is now being applied in secular professions and so on. There's so much material here. So, in terms of the discernment process, knowledge aspect is important. Understanding the theological meaning of vocation, basically, vocation as God's gift, as God's call, and human response in discipleship. Just the two. So you don't have to read all our dissertations and all these books. Just stick to this very basic meaning of vocation. Vocation as God's call, it's God's call, it's the initiative of God. Therefore, it's the whole area of revelation. It's the whole area of the Trinity. It's the whole area of theology of grace. It's God's call. It's transcendence. It's the awareness of God. So that whole area, any study, any formation that deepens our understanding of the mystery of God is part of the knowledge aspect. And the second is human response in discipleship. Again, being in touch with the self and so on is a task. So knowledge aspect, and here to simplify matters, this has helped me a lot in my work in vocation promotions. I was active for 10 years. After that, I was sent to Rome. I wrote on vocation. Then I came back. I was made president of LST. I taught on vocation. And then after my term in LST, I continued teaching, assigned to the Jesuit residence, and then now engaged in the various retreat ministries of the province. And now I got a status from the provincial. I'm assigned back to Loyola House of Studies. First studies, I can accompanying the young Jesuits in their vocation. So I eat vocation for breakfast, for lunch, and for supper. So after all these readings, I found this Combs and Nemeth very helpful. 3 questions. This will really help us in the vocation discernment process. Who the Lord calls a person to be, how the Lord calls a person to become, and what the Lord calls a person to do. The first question deals with identity. The second question is about lifestyle. And the third is about ministry and mission. So, identity. I like this quote from Pope Francis. These questions should be centered less on ourselves and our own inclinations, but on others, so that our discernment leads us to see our life in relation to their lives. That is why I would remind you of the most important question of all. So often in life, we waste time asking ourselves, who am I? You can keep asking, who am I? For the rest of your lives. But the real question is, for whom am I? Yeah. Because we have candidates who continue to discern. 60 years old discernment about the choice of life, because a lot of the questions always centered on on the ego, finding meaning for myself, so on. So, identity, for whom am I? The second is lifestyle, and the third, ministry. So I will summarize this for you. So I will, I just give you indications how to apply these questions regarding choices of life, especially when we guide the young. In this audience, I don't have to convince you because I think 99% of you here have gone through this process. But it's really to help the young when we go outside this hall or when we finish this conference. So in terms of ministry, the Catechism for Filipino Catholics, very important, doing something for God's kingdom in public on behalf of the Christian community, empowered by a gift of faith and identifiable. Now, let's apply this in terms of the different states of life. Para madali, lay faithful, majority. Archbishop Cruz said, the church is composed of 99% of the lay faithful. So kung 99%, then in terms of the challenge of mentoring, grabe, so much. So in terms of identity, please review the post-synodal exhortation of St. John Paul II. I would say the most comprehensive church document, Christi Fidelis Laici. In terms of identity, in terms of helping us understand the lay vocation, please refer to that document. Lifestyle, secular dimension, involvement in the world, majority family, professions, and work. That's mentioned in Christus Vivid. That's the majority questions of the young. So in terms of lifestyle, check. In terms of ministry, engagement in temporal matters, and by the participation in earthly activities. So that's it. Summarized. Identity, lifestyle, and mission. So if the lifestyle and the ministry is temporal or earthly, if we have young people who come to us for direction and they are thinking of pursuing family life, don't make them little priests or little sisters in the convent or in the parish. Some of our lay ministers, they act more serious than their parish priests. They even act more like bishops with bigger crosses, with even stoles, different colors, embroidered and so on. That's a confusion of lifestyle and identity. So kung lay vocation, lifestyle, temporal, secular, don't make them, wear habit of a pink sister or, whatever color if the person is pursuing a lay vocation, mentoring. Expose them to earthly activities, temporal activities. Refer them to lay professionals, to family members. There are many groups in the Philippines involved in lay ministry, Couples for Christ, BCBP. Expose them to these groups. Again, the same thing, identity. We are called to be shepherds. Refer to the post-synodal exhortation of Pope St. John Paul II, Pastores Dabo Vobis. Lifestyle, pastoral charity, because as shepherds, we are there to feed the flock. And ministry, to serve the people of God in the ministry of sanctifying, teaching, and ruling. I will not dwell on this because I might compete with a course in LST or Don Bosco in terms of holy orders. But again, to have a clear identity, a clear lifestyle, a clear ministry is important in mentoring and in the discernment process. We don't confuse the identities. We don't confuse the lifestyle, and we don't confuse the ministry. So in the asking, we ask that we guide the young who the Lord calls you to be, how the Lord calls you to become and what the Lord calls you to do. Now, if someone even in the novitiate for the men congregation, if a novice is afraid to face the people, doesn't want to go to the apostolate, for the novice master and formator, it's very easy to decide. And the decision is go out. Because if you are thinking of becoming a priest, then the identity of a priest is a shepherd. Then you have to face the people. That's why Father Arupe, when he was general, told the Jesuits, you cannot just be mere scholars, spending the rest of your time in the library as scholars or as scientists. You have to have pastoral ministry outside teaching. So when I was in Rome, I was assigned in the Jesuit Curia for 6 years. All of us working in the Curia have to go out on Sundays for ministries, visiting the prisons. But for me, it was so easy because I told the superior, for my ministry, it's the Filipino migrants. And of course, every Sunday, wonderful, Mass, and of course, the eating and so on. And then the Jesuit said, Joe, how come you're enjoying? In fact, after breakfast, you're so in a hurry to go out for your apostolate. Could you want to come with me? And they started coming with me. So one of them changed from the prison ministry to the Filipino migrants. It's not moving. Naghang. Maybe I will just end there. Uh, right. Nag-jump. Nako, nag-jump na siya. Okay. For the religious, majority belong to this specific Christian vocation, the Vita Consecrata. Don't tell me to explain that. No. Again, just read the exhortation and reflect on this. The more we're familiar of this, then we can guide people. Knowledge aspect. Lifestyle, the profession of evangelical counsels, and then the ministry, the different forms of spiritual life based on charism. So one is applying to become a Jesuit. One time, I said, okay, what are you moved to do as a Jesuit? Oh, Father, I just want to focus on this particular work. Well, for this particular work, you can apply to the Benedictines. Because for the Jesuit, you cannot just focus on one work. You have to obey. You can be assigned anywhere and anywhere. Take note in terms of your charism and so on. Father, sister, I want to join your congregation. Okay, what are you moved to do? What the Lord calls you to do? I want to become a ballet dancer. Well, this person is applying to the Carmelite order. Well, so that's it. So very easy. Okay. So then the personal aspect, I don't have to discuss this because the personal aspect is the whole mentoring. That's the first part that I shared with you. And then the practical aspect, in terms of the practical aspect of vocation accompaniment, first vocation interest phase, the interest, the desire of the person. That's the first program for vocation promotions, followed by the vocation identification phase, meaning the person is now more engaged and more committed to pursue the discernment process. And then finally, the vocation internalization phase. Okay. The last, I've not emphasized this in my previous talks. But after doing my dissertation, I got inspired by the Holy Spirit to underline this charismatic aspect in the vocation discernment. The charismatic aspect is simply to be aware that we have a lot of gifts. Each one of you here is gifted. Okay? God's gifts, charisms. And as members of the church, each one of us is gifted for the building up of the church. So, very simply, it's important to ask, what are my gifts of having, my gifts of doing, and my gifts of being? Awareness of these gifts connect us with the call of the Holy Spirit, and the awareness of these gifts becomes now the content of vocation discernment. Awareness of these gifts makes one happy and consoled. If one candidate is depressed, you just ask the candidate, or a young person is depressed, ask the person these three questions. What are my gifts of having, my gifts of doing, and my gifts of being? You are depressed, it's a gift of being. I'm just joking. But that's it. Awareness of gifts. We have to revive that. Because without any awareness of gifts, then we become depressed, we become desolate, and there's no more content for any vocation, discernment, and mentoring. Thank you.